Hi boys and girls, it's good to see all of you again. I hope you had a fun time with your writing assignment yesterday. You did such a good job on them all. I'm excited to see what you write about today. Today, I have a special story for you. It's my actually very favorite book in the whole world, and I thought that would be a fun thing to get to read to you since Easter's coming up, and I thought this was a very appropriate one. So this book is by a lady who wrote stories way back in the late 1800s. So that was a really long time ago, like 120 years ago. And her name is Beatrix Potter. And she lived in England. And she used to write letters to one of her nanny or babysitter's kids. And when she would write the letters, she would paint pictures of cute little rabbits and things. And one of the stories she used to tell the little girls in her letters that she would write to them was about these 4 little bunnies named Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. I bet some of you have probably seen the movie about Peter Rabbit. And this story is called The Tale of Peter Rabbit. My daddy used to read me this all the time when I was little. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And also, one really cool thing about Beatrix Potter is not only is she the author, she's also the illustrator, and she is one of the first 2 children's book writers to ever use color in her prints. So it's really, really amazing that a book that's 120 years old has color in it. It's super cool. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dear," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. Uh-oh. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden. I bet you knew that was going to happen. And squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. That's one of my favorite pictures. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he'd forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes amongst the cabbages. There's a little black shoe. And the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. There he is. Poor Peter. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows. This is my favorite line in the book. Who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Those are big words, implored and exert. So they're saying, Please, please, Peter, get up. That's what that means. They're imploring, they're begging him to do something, to get up and do something, exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Kerchoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter is making quite the mess. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. What's cool about Beatrix Potter, all of her books are really tiny and small like this, and one of the next books she wrote was called The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. So if you ever would like to read about Peter's cousin, there's more books than just this one. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Screech, scratch, scratch, screech. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was, I don't know if you can see it, it's such a tiny little picture here, way back here, the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was a second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. So in 2 weeks' time, Peter lost all those clothes multiple times. His mama must not have been very happy. I know your mommies and daddies aren't very happy when you lose your clothes in the lost and found. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. This next part's the best. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. And I wish I was with you in real person right now, because usually when I read this book around Easter time, I like to give my class some bread and milk and blackberries, because it's kind of a unique thing to get to eat, a very special treat. So I'm happy I got to meet with all of you again. Your writing assignment for today, and again, you can do it in your journal, or you can do it on a separate piece of paper. You can do it on a whiteboard if you have a whiteboard at your home. You can write it any way you want. You can use markers or pencils or whatever you think looks the best. And I think I'll put a link up too. So if you would like to learn how to draw Peter Rabbit, I'll put a link to someone showing you how to draw Peter Rabbit, if that would be fun for you. And what I would like for you to write is, what is your favorite book and why? So think about that. What is your favorite book and why? It could be a book from your home, a book from your grandparents' home, or from school. Any book that you know. Write about that. And I look forward to seeing all of your responses. And I love it, love it, love it that on Facebook we're getting to see a lot of each other's things now. So I will see you guys all tomorrow. Nope, not tomorrow, Monday. I'll see you all on Monday. All right, have a good one. Bye.